Kei ngā kahika o te Nehenehenui, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai ki te whare o te reo irirangi o Maniopoto. Welcome to another webinar series, Te Puna Kōrero o te Nehenehenui. This platform is where we kōrero with experts within their respective fields, discussing what matters to you and your whānau, and also giving you an opportunity to ask questions from the experts directly. You can pop your questions in the Facebook comment section below, and we will get through as many of those questions as we can this evening. Well, today, the Ministry of Health reported more than 19,540 new community cases across Aotearoa. And sadly, the reported deaths of 24 people, the highest record number of deaths so far. The total number of active cases within Te Nehenehenui is now over 1,830. And as we know, those numbers are expected to increase, with some hinting that we are in the peak of this pandemic. And so for many whānau, they have already tested positive, and some are currently experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and the impact of isolation. But whilst there may be some practical support for whānau during these tough periods, how well are we looking after ourselves? And so tonight's session, we have a kōrero with huanga who are experts in their own regard, asking how do we nurture our overall well-being during the pandemic? Tinana, wairua, hinengaro, whānau. And so to help share their experiences and knowledge, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to tonight's show Milena Huaki, Te Miri Tākarei, Nick Poa, and Timi Tāpara. Tēnā koutou e te whānau. It's so lovely to have you all with us this evening. Before we get into some questions tonight, let's just very quickly go around the room and introduce yourselves. And maybe just share with us where you are in the world and just how you are coping at the moment during the pandemic. And maybe we can start with you, Milena. Tēnā koe.
Kei ngā ihu o ngā maunga whakahi, kei ngā wai whakatere taniwha tēnā koutou katoa. E tautoko ana ngā mihi kua mihia. Kia rātou mā kua whiturangitia haere o ki atu. Ki te hunga e tau nei, mauri ora. Ki te taumata, Maniapoto FM, ngā mihi. Ko wai ahau, ko au titihi o ngā mokopuna o ngā hapu e maha o te hauauru. He wai kei kirikiri roa e noho ana I tēnei wā. Ko Milena Hua ki tōku ingoa whānau no te ākau o Tokomaru, te tai rāwhiti, he oi no te taharoa a māma. Ko tōku tūranga I tēnei wā, kei au te tihi kamupene Māori, ko te Hauauru Collective te ingoa, he tāwharau mō taku whānau, ki te whai I tō mātou mana motuhake me te ora hoki. Mauri ora kia tātou e pai nei.
Tēnā koe te tuahine. Lovely to see, and thank you for joining us this evening. Let's head over to the other puti that's joining us this evening. Tēnā koe te miri.
Tēnā koe, Wini Tanau Tira, tēnā tātou katoa. Me henui ana ki te kaupapa, nāna tātou I huitahi te ahiahi nei. Ko ai ahau, he mokopuna, no ngā hapu maha o te Nehenehenui, engari tae te kite ki raro nei, ko Ngāti Rora, ko Ngāti Huiao, ngētihi o ngā hapu, ko I te taotoku māma, ko Mona Rawa, ko Hori o ko tupuna no Awakino, I te taotoku pāpa ko Eva Rawa, ko Charlie, Gray o ko tupuna no reira, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe te miri, and it's lovely to speak with you again this evening. All right, let's head over to Nick. Tēnā koe e te tuakana.
Kia ora. Kia ora, cousin Winston and whānau in the panel, and kia ora Maniapoto and the respective viewers. My name is Nick Poa. I'm from Maniapoto, and currently I live between Kirikiriroa and Hangatiki. My whānau reside within the former Hangatiki Primary School. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Nick. It's lovely to have you on board this evening. And I understand we're going to head across the ditch and head over to our whanaunga in Australia. Tēnā koe to me.
Ai, toi toko ana ngā mihi e ke aia. O tira ki a koe, Kazi Winston, te kai whakahaere o te kōrero nei, te wānanga nei, o tira I te iwi. Ai, uri hau, no Ngāti Mani o poto, ko ngā kūraho te maunga, ko mga pūrawa, ko mga okewa, ngā awa, ko Ngāti Pihi, Ngāti te kanawa, Ngāti Huiau, ngā hapū, ko Rere Amanu rawa ko te Kaipatū, ngā marae, ko Timi Tāpara te ingoa, te tangata anō hoki. No hanga tiki rawa ko ahi te reiria, ngā te mea ko tupu ake au ahi te reiria, e ono tau, ki muri I haere mai au ki kirikiri roa. Ai, no reira ko au ko koe ko au, ko tātou ko tātou. Really privileged and honoured to be in this space today. I'm actually looking forward to learning, being in the shared space of learning, and looking forward to, if it's anything to go by the banter before, we should be in for a few laughs along the way, whānau.
Whai, tēnā koe to me, and I'm looking forward to learning from you and actually all of you this evening. But thank you once again for joining us in tonight's webinar. If I can start with you, Milena, when we look at the overall concept of well-being, some people refer to it as the tapawhā. Just wondering if you could share with us your interpretation of one's well-being and maybe what does that look like?
Wow. Straight there, eh? Geez. Tātou. I think Te Whare Tapawhā is an awesome tool and a great guide to help us find that balance. And I think balance for me is the key. Our space, our balance with Te Taiao is important and certainly not happening. We seem to think that we are in a position where we can control Te Taiao, therefore there isn't any balance. So that's kind of my position in terms of that is the balance and whatever that might look like. I also believe in the principles of ora, and with ora being one of the I'm just going to put it out there, and some mātanga reo, someone will probably correct me, but kei te pai, kei te wānanga tonu au, but the principles of ora, everything should be in a space where we e ngana ana tātou ki te whakareo I te ora te henengaro, te ora o te tangata, te oranga o te tinana, te whenua, te moana hoki. So it's my position, yeah.
Tēnā koe. And you touched on Te Taia, which we will talk about a little bit later on this evening. But if I can come to you, Te Miri, just hearing from what Milena just shared with us, does anything there resonate with you in terms of the overall concept of well-being?
Yeah, te katoa. And just before I start talking, Winston, you said these questions were going to be easy. Ingari. Kei konei tonu tātou. But yeah, I think, again, ora looks different for everybody and it depends on what's going on in your life. You know, and I think if I look at the concept of ora and I look at the times that we live in today, we're all navigating or we're all searching for an ora that we've never had to look for in our whole entire existence because of what the world looks like today. So, tautoko ana I ngā kōrero at whaia, Milena, when she talks about our connection to the taiao, because, you know, kei te mohi o ke tātou te iwi Māori, how important it is to be connection to the taiao is important because that's where we got a lot of our answers from. And I think in the times that we're in now, we are being reminded about those importance in terms of looking out away from our screens and going back to those simple things of life and going back to nature. So, ai, koina taku, hi mai heneti.
Tēnā
Ka pai
koe.
te taha ki te mire. And, thank you for answering that part-time. And I'm hoping that the questions are going to be a lot more easy and a lot more flowing as the night progresses. But if I can come to you, Nick, and I'm quite sure this is a relatively easy question for you, but I was just wondering, Nick, if you can share with us your thoughts on well-being and what particular model, if we can, that you follow.
Yeah, so just going along like a little choo-choo train and adding on our little kōrero onto the first pātai. Models of health and well-being, I've been really passionate about reconnecting our people of Maniapoto, Waikato, Tainui descent into a model that has been left to us by our tupuna. And I'd go straight towards not being controversial, probably get a lot of messages on the Facebook page, but I go straight to Te Paki o Matariki. So if we're utilising the wharitapa whā, well, sometimes we forget that we have our own models of intrinsic, cultural, indigenous to our tribal territories, that our tupuna, that were very learned from esoteric whariwānanga. They left behind these tools for us to access. Now, when we look at Te Paki o Matariki, we see those elements that we were talking about just before around balance, around ora, around the kauairunga, the celestial realm, and around the kauairaro, the terrestrial realm, and around the connection between the two. So that's my reference point, and that's what I teach down in Otago University lecturing, as I teach from our point of view, from a Tainui point of view, how Te Paki o Matariki can guide us, and if we look into these esoteric symbols that were left behind. Also, going back to pūrākau, going back to traditional storylines, and that reconnection of us from where we come from Papa Tuanuku, and never forgetting that that we were created from those soils. So when there's a disconnect, like we see within Te Paki o Matariki between the celestial realm and the terrestrial realm, we can see that there needs to be a reconnection. So it's no surprise to me that everyone is going back to the whenua, coming back home, traveling back from overseas, coming back home, and even to the extent that everyone's now getting, it's too expensive to travel, petrol prices. So we're really getting forced by Ngā Atua, really, by the heavenly movers and shakers within the realms, to stop, to recollect ourselves, and are really trying to push through a message that is emanating from the Wairua realm, from the celestial realm coming down to us here in the terrestrial, because of all the harm that we've been causing. Anyway, that's my non-controversial view on it.
Oh, that's lovely. I could listen to you all evening, cousin. So thank you for sharing. And if we can come over to you, Timmy, in your whare, what structure or model or concept or understanding is it that you follow and why?
Well, if that's the non-controversial kōrero, Kazi, I'd love to sit down and hear the controversial one at some stage, because I think what you started with was talking about all the different iwi will have their own take, and similar to reo and mita, so I've actually loved going through and looking at different whole order structures and systems, whether it was Te Wheke or Katarina Mataira, talks about Ngā Whetū, but the whare tapa whā, I think for us, and loving going off the back of Malena's kōrero, a notion of order as an ongoing thing that's changing, that's fluid, that's not actually stable. But when you look at Western medicine, there's a big focus on pathologizing people, putting a label on them, diagnosing them, and then once they have that, they're stuck with that. And if you dig deep into cultural beliefs and kōrero, I think there's a real pakanga spirit. There's a real reflecting that happens, especially in a Wairua realm. And I'll never forget, one of my kaiako mentors in the whole order space always said the body will do what it wants to do. And then in terms of linking that into this time and space, and Nick, he said it and my ears pinned up, that Ngā Atua are forcing this. I think the world is actually doing what it has to do. And I think actually we need to take a step back and listen. So what we do in our whare actually is a lot of shifting perspective. So if you look at two fundamental things that are happening because of COVID that no one can change, wearing a mask, isolating yourself. Now, both of those, from a whole order perspective, actually don't make sense. So if COVID's a respiratory problem, affects your cardiopulmonary circuit, your lungs, your lungs, as soon as you put a mask on, it's harder to breathe. So we've got a restrictive chest infection that now it's harder to breathe. That doesn't even make sense. And then now you need to isolate yourself. So now you need to isolate yourself. Now you need to come away from everyone. Well, maybe that's why mental health, successful and unsuccessful attempts and suicide are at the highest they've ever been. They triple 4, 5, 6 times what the global COVID count is. So we said you need to isolate yourself. So based on those two fundamental principles, they don't actually make sense. So if we can look at this with a shifting perspective lens, how can we shift both of those practices? So the first one, wearing a mask, restricts your breathing. Now we have to really focus on deep breathing. You know, I do similar to Nick, obviously not as astute as you, Kazi. Mine's normally with probably some tamariki or high school students, but I love talking about breathing, you know, and actually ask people, why do we breathe? What element makes us breathe? And everybody says oxygen, which is the wrong answer. The reason we breathe is carbon dioxide. We need to blow off carbon dioxide to then breathe in oxygen. So now because we've got restricted breathing, we have to go back to practices of our tūpuna, like breath work, meditation, karakia, inui. You know, so it's shifting the perspective of, okay, they're going to make us wear this mask. How can we then still bring in these elements, you know, because like Timidi said before, we're trying to find things that we just can't find now. And a lot of that is because we've lost how to implement and whakamahia those whakaaro and those tikanga in our everyday. And then just quickly, the isolation part, again, shifting perspective. Maybe a lot of people need to be alone right now because they need to be alone. Maybe they need to go within themselves and reflect what's their relationship like, honestly and integrity with themselves, with their relationship to Te Taiao, with their relationship to other people. But before they worry about the external relationship, let's really get centered on this internal picture. So, you know, no one has time to find 30 minutes of exercise, yet we're still seeing a deficit of Māori and Polynesian 7, 8, 10 years plus to European here in Aotearoa. And a big difference is 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise. That doesn't need to be going for a run. Maybe in this isolation time, maybe it's walking your pepeha. You know, maybe it's getting outside and learning the story and connecting with Tane as he finds mates. You know, all these sorts of things to be able to bring in, as Nick spoke to, you know, other realms. So, yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Tibi. And you raised a lot of very valid points there, and a lot of deep thinking, I think, for a lot of whānau. So thank you for sharing. Milena, if I can come to you, and I hope this is a relatively easy question for you, but I was just wondering if you would be able to share with us, I guess, you know, the foundations of order and how you've been able to implement that into your life.
It was a matter of trying to find something at a time of need. So, you know, you hear lots of kōrero, like, you know, when you fail, you know, it's good to fail, because through that, the only way is up, or you are able to navigate and find better solutions for your life to get out of that particular rut. And so it was through being in a rut that I realized I needed to do something, and I never felt right that I became a part of the group of people perhaps that were always waiting for forms of, you know, handouts and whatever that looked like. And so I had a responsibility as a solo mother to do whatever it took to whakarewa, or to change or reset our lives. So it was that was the foundations of the particular change for me. It's kind of morphed into a space now that orders become a model of practice for me. And I'm no social worker or anything like that, because that's quite a common thing within the social work practice, is having a model of practice. But it was certainly an awesome guide for me to remind myself he hanga mahi kei tua. So yeah, that was the need. So I identified things like instant gratification can no longer be something that I could focus on, and to understand that sitting within the spaces of consciousness, like te po, te kune, te pupuke, and all that sort of stuff, is an absolute good thing to do, and not be controlled by this Gregorian time system that really governs how we proceed through life. So through that patience, through that reflective state that I ended up having to be in, I now and developing this particular order model of practice, which I must say it isn't rocket science, but it's just helped guide me. So what does that look like? So just to summarize, my children and I, we are all self-employed. We work hard for that. We work in kaupapa that help to support other people. The networks that we have now associated ourselves with, like to me, like Tūtonu, are awesome, and it's a very reciprocal space. But that was also made on the foundations that totally and absolutely embraced kura kaupapa, kohanga reo, te reo Māori. And so I can say that the kids have all come through that space, and their tirohanga atu ki te ao is he Māori. So yeah, that's it pretty much.
Kia ora, lovely. Thank you for sharing. And just a reminder to our whānau that are watching at home that you've been hearing from our whānau here, and I must say, you feel like a student just listening to all the kōrero that's being shared this evening. But for whānau at home, if you've got questions of our guest panelists this evening, you can pop your pātai into the Facebook comment section, and we'll get through as many of those questions as we can this evening by asking those questions to our guest panelists. If I can come to you now, Te Miriu. Now, we know that we spoke to you earlier on this year, and our whānau will know that you and your tāne had COVID-19, and it was your māra that kept you both going, if you like, during that isolation period. Just wondering how much was it, being out in the māra, being with the taiao, how much did it help with your well-being, both as an individual and as a couple?
I think it was, and it wasn't just our whare that did it. Our other whānau in Otorohanga, they who were isolating at the same time, they found the same need to go back out and reconnect with the whenua. But at first, if I'm honest, it was because we were bored. So, your last year, the isolation period was 14 days. And when the first person got it, well, you start your 14 days. And then when the second person got it, well, you started your next lot of 14 days. So we ended up isolating longer than 14 days. And our want to get out to our māra wasn't because, we were looking for inspiration, all those types of things. Wasn't nothing deep like that. It started off because we were bored of being inside, bored of looking at the screen, because, when you're māwiwi with this mate, that's what you're doing for the first few days. And so it was more about getting out of the whare. And so it wasn't until, I suppose, a little bit like what Marlena was saying, it wasn't until we started getting into the motion of it that we started to discover the ora that we started to feel in the mahi that we were doing. So, we went away from watching Snapchat to going to watch videos on YouTube about, different things like Like, who's the tomatoes good friend to grow next to in the mara, all those types of things. So it ended up encouraging us to go and learn about some other things. We had the basics of how to grow things. But I mean, our rangahau, I suppose, got a little bit more in depth as we started to reconnect with the papa and start enjoying all those types of things. And we're now at a point where we were in isolation in October last year. And so now we're at a point where we get to harvest the mahi that we've done. And he ora anō kei roto I tēnā, and he akoranga anō kei roto I aua momo mahi. So it wasn't because we were trying to find a type of order. It come out of boredom. And out of that boredom, we got to learn, reconnect, and grow a passion. So we like growing things. Like, we've had mara in the past, but I mean, our mara this year is going to be huge. So one of the biggest things that we sort of looked at and learnt was like, man, we've got so much grass. Like, why? Why do we have so much grass? One, you've got to go and mow the lawns all the time. But if you put a mara kai in there, you're just weeding here and there, or you're just leaving it and letting it go and be natural. And ka puta toru ngā hua, ka puta toru ngā kai, or ka tipu toru ngā kai. So, it wasn't like we, but again, we're grateful for the mara and the things that we have been able to learn and our appreciation for kai. So even, I mean, we still go to McDonald's and we still go to Fishtown and we still go to BP for a caramel latte. But at the same time, it's made us have a look at our kai and the things that we're eating. And it's not as, we don't go to those places as much because we've been able to see the benefits in growing our own kai and all of the health benefits, I suppose, that come with knowing exactly where your kai has come from and all those types of things. So, have really appreciated the mātauranga that we did have prior to lockdown that encouraged us to get outside and back into the mara. And because of that, we're extending our mara and big airs and want to grow an orchard even. That's how far it went.
Nice. And just very quickly, Timothy, just during that time, was there one particular vegetable that you had a close affinity with? Or was there one vegetable that you knew you came out knowing a lot more than what you did before, COVID isolation?
Yeah, so we were lucky that before we went into lockdown, we had actually received some kumara from our mara here in town. From Auntie Michelle. So our kumara and riwai, actually. So those were probably the things that we were most excited about. So my mate, he loves his titi. His reasonings for wanting to grow riwai wasn't because he wanted it to grow. He was just thinking about it being in his pot with his titi and however many months later. But yeah, definitely our riwai and definitely our kumara were kai that we got to learn a little bit more about.
Nice, lovely. Looking forward to having dinner at your place very soon. If I can come to you, Nick, and I know, Nick, you have a special tong and you've been doing it for a wee while now. And I was wondering if you could explain to our whānau just a little bit about the mahi of a matakite. What that mahi entails, and maybe how do you protect your taha hinengaro, through that mahi?
Complex questions. I just wanted to add on to the previous kōrero around moving into states of te pō and into states of te kore, and touching upon disconnection and reconnection. And then the reconnections are around what we're previously alluding towards, reconnecting back to atua, eh? So what we're hearing in the kōrero is that reconnection back to Papa Tuanuku, back to Mother Earth, where our pūrākau stories, our traditional storylines for us as Māori, where the empowerment and the mana and the guidance comes from what some may seem to think that they are very basic children mythologies. When you look and you cast a lens over them, you see the wealth and the depth of mātauranga and guidance that is embedded within them. I find it fascinating within our Māori culture. And then hearing what Te Miri, what Cousin was talking about, for what you were alluding towards, Winston, around my knowledge base around traditional Māori healing, well, everything Te Miri was mentioning and the reconnection and within that state of te kore that they were entered into through this virus. Now, if it wasn't the virus, something negative that they took in to te kore and started to formulate within that space of nothingness and formulated something positive out of it, then that would have never have happened. So what we're really talking about is we're talking about the fundamentals of Māori healing. Māori healing, that is the basis of it all. Someone comes, if we just talk about it in a very basic format, someone comes with an ailment. It is typically the Māori healer that takes that ailment and all the kōrero and the mamai that comes with that from the whānau and the patient, and takes it into that space of te kore, or that meditative space that Timmy was talking about. We take it into us and we formulate something, a positive pathway that comes out. That positive pathway might be that the Māori healer feels like that they need to, through the guidance of wairua, atua, tupuna, that they need to perform mirimiri, or that they need to go and gather a certain type of rongoa. So when I was hearing Te Miri talking about all the foods and the kai and the reconnecting back to Papatūānuku, straight away I was like listening, oh, that's all rongoa that they're growing. But most people don't reference kumara and those things. But through all cultures, we have been disconnected from those very traditional basic forms of kai that we were all growing all over the world, were actually our very strong medicinal elements within them. But because of a disconnection, these are all the swings and roundabouts of the Western paradigm that we live in. It's about being disconnected, and then it's always been about being reconnected, and then finding the values in those things that we've lost, and then being empowered again, and then shifting what Wairua is talking about. Humanity is need to shift to the next stage. There's a big push for a shift to happen. Does that uncontroversial answer to my question?
No, that's lovely important. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost. Not lost. I shouldn't. Lost is probably not the word, but I'm forgetting that we're in a panel, and just the kōrero that's being shared. Honestly, it's just so wonderful, and I wish we could go on and on and on. But I do know that a lot of our whānau are wanting to ask questions. Pop those questions into the comments section of the Facebook page, and we'll start asking those pātai to our panelists. Just before we go to those questions, Timmy, if I can come to you, and I was just wondering, because you work with Te Taha Tinana, just wondering, what have you observed during this pandemic? Has there been an increase in the number of people getting into exercise?
Well, firstly, again, I'm loving this, and I was in the same place when you were talking to Miri, and Nick's going, oh, that's normal, and I was thinking, I even heard Rangi Māori in as well, so I think this is more or less what we're talking about, whether we like it or not, and it's, touching on what Nick said, the external connection. There's external forces that are now forcing us internally to have to try and connect with ourselves. And it's challenging things like belief systems. It's challenging things like, so before, you never would have looked at grass and thought, oh, that could be a marakai. But now that there's that appreciation, it's shifted belief systems. If we can do that with something as small and trivial as kai, what can we do internally with people in terms of, say, skills and talent, for example? You know, so what sorts of things are hiding inside people, but because they're telling themselves that this te pō and te kore is a place they don't want to be in, or a bad place or stuff like that, you know, you shift the perspective on that. That could actually be a place of perspective. I look back and reflect on my journey, and I actually needed to disconnect from a lot of external crap, feel physically like I was in te pō until I could actually stop and listen. And that's probably a tāpura thing. So big shout out to all of the whānau out there. I'm sure they'll understand that. But yeah, I think what we're seeing in the clinic more now is again what I spoke to before, way more disconnection internally with people. And there's sort of deep spiritual things, but then there's also just black and white questions. You know, one whanaunga very well known to this space, Levi, he actually asked me a question when in Nana Aroha's reo class. You know, so I've been in New Zealand 2 or 3 years, and I remember I'd always reflect on going back home to Taharoa and going riding the horses and all that sort of stuff. I was like, oh, cool, cuz, you know, and all I cared about was buying a house and living the white picket dream and all that sort of stuff. And then he just black and white asked me, he goes, cuz, do you reckon if you got dropped at the marae, you could survive? And I go, what do you mean? Like with people there and stuff? And he goes, no, just the marae somewhere remotely, and all you have is a ngahere. And the moana and the awa, do you think you could survive? You know, and that was actually a real challenging question. You know, it challenged my belief systems, it challenged, like what Timiri said before, we would have, from a convenience space, it's been installed from a Western pathway to go in and earn money to go and buy a kai. But what if you take money away? What if you can't go to work? You know, internally, could you actually go and do that? And it's definitely been, you know, it's definitely a journey internally for me. But it's what we're seeing a lot in the whānau that are coming in to see us in the whare. There's physical things that are sort of there and been there for a while, but what we're seeing way more of is internal disconnect. And in a time like now, they're forcing us to externally, you know, be disconnected. I think that can actually be quite a challenging space for people. So instead of te pō being this negative space, maybe if we embrace the takarangi for what it is, maybe we need to walk through te pō to really appreciate te ao marama. And actually, maybe, like I said before, it's an ongoing spectrum that we keep going. It's not this easy Western whakaro that it's a black and white thing. You are labeled as this. We're going to call you this. Actually, it shifts. You know, you might go to sleep one day and you've done a lot of work in the garden. There's been a lot of karakia. You know, that your rangi māre, your taha wahine side, shining imminently. You might go to sleep and boom, wake up, you're the other side. And sometimes it doesn't even relate to you. Like what Nick was talking about before with the stars, you know, linking in with the maramataka. I think it's something that everyone is slowly going back to, because whether we like it or not, we have to appreciate the seasons and really starting to challenge what people can do internally and do as a whānau, how they keep their whare, how that transcends across the generations. You know, I think that's probably more what we're seeing. So sorry, cuz, I know that was a taha tinana based question, but yeah, we're not seeing physical problems because people aren't out there playing combat sports because they're not allowed to touch each other. They're not socially allowed to go to recreational centres and do things. So actually they're coming in completely broken internally, trying to find the answer externally. Kia ora.
Can I jump in there? Hey, Tapiri, is that, you know, we're so used to this departmentalising of things, like it's supposed to be a taha tinana kōrero, but really it's not. It's a everything kōrero, you know, so tika ana koe to me, you know. All good. That's all.
Yeah. Absolutely. Tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua. Okay, we've come to that time now where we're going to just take a look at some of the questions that have been coming through, because I know our whānau are quite eager to get their questions answered. And so let's take a look now at our first question that's coming from our whānau. And this is from Christelle. Kia ora, Christelle. Your question is, what are some good tips for whānau that are working from home right now to keep their mind, body, and soul healthy, especially whānau who have loving sisters yelling on the phone all the time. And I can just see by the reaction of our panelists that they probably can all relate to this question. So let's just very quickly go around the room, starting with you, Milena. So what are just some good tips for Christelle, who has some very loudmouth sisters working in the background?
Well, titihi mea me hoki atu koe ki te wai pea. Tuku ki te wai, those sorts of things. No, don't be scared to get water, whakarite your home, to reinstate the mauri in your space. I know there's probably a bit hohonu, but you did say that at the beginning. What were some tips? I'm not too sure about the description of your sisters. I can relate to that. I just had the dog barking and then a whole heap of other people, in and out of this room and that sort of stuff. But I think that's just going to be an ongoing state within your whare. But something simple that you can do is, get some wai, do a karakia, whakarite, whakawātea tō whare.
Absolutely. And I know, Timidi, you come from a big whānau yourself. So what are some of the tips that you could offer Christelle in terms of, working from home and, trying to look after her own, mind, body and soul in a healthy, conscious way?
Yeah, cuz you can't get rid of the big mouth sisters. They're with us forever. Engari, mo te taha ki tō hinengaro, me ki tō wairua ki tō sinana. One of the things that I like telling people is to come off your phone, step away from technology, step away from your phone, even if it's for like 10, 15 minutes, and just go and sit outside, because sometimes we're talking about all of this internal stuff that we need to go through to be able to puta ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. But sometimes we have to sit and go, besides our sisters having big mouths, what about it is actually annoying us? And if it is annoying, is it them or is it actually you? So again, it's all of that reflecting stuff, and just be by yourself and be tau. But especially during the times that we're in now, there's lots of information about everything that's going on in the world. And sometimes, I know for myself, sometimes when I'm trying to switch off, I go to my phone and I just go like this and just scroll. But what we're actually doing is filling ourselves up with way more information, filling our roro up with lots of different things, and you end up taking on the emotions that come with those posts. So I think ko aku kupu ki aku is just to move away from your phone, move away from your screen, go out and sit outside if you can, away from your sister, hopefully, or even down the driveway if she's that loud. And just be for a bit and have a wānanga with yourself and ask yourself why this is happening for you, because kei roto I taua wahanga o taua wahi, te wānanga and te oranga or the answers that you're looking for. So that might be one way to do it.
Lovely. And what about you, Nick? Do you have whanaunga, who are big mouths and who are yelling in the background on the phone all the time? Any tips there for Christelle?
No, I've got the biggest mouth, so no. Well, one tip is from a Māori rongoa pathway is when you're going to collect your puna wai to whakarite your house, put them in a pot, go and collect some kawa, and then brew it up in the pot, and then put it into a cup and give it to your big mouth sister. Little will she know that one of the properties in there is a mild sedative. Oh, everyone went quiet. There's a mild sedative in there, likened to green tea.
Kia ora.
Just write that one down.
Other than that, you tell that big mouth sister of yours to come up here and stay with us in our whare.
That's lovely advice, and yeah, I certainly have written that suggestion down. And I was wondering, Timmy, do you have any similar advice to give Christelle?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'll be interested to know what Shiloh reckons, because is this advice for you or her? Because we'll see who she thinks is the big mouth. I think this is probably one of those internal versus external problems, to be honest with you. So, there's things you can't control externally, there's things you can control internally. So what can you still do to keep your mind, what's the question, mind, body, and soul healthy? I think implementing a routine is still really helpful, in these sorts of times. Knowing what you want to get done through the day. If there's productive times and you're going to be implicated because of background noise, then maybe you need to address your setup, address where you do your mahi. And then there's the obvious ones, I think in today's day and age, it's really hard for people to communicate because society has just meant that we all need to go and internalize things. So I think small things like whānau conversations and that, that they're really important. So trying to implement those things. So, having a conversation with your sister, say, hey, between this time and this time, it's my younger brother's birthday, and I haven't been here for years. Yet still love coming to stuff like this, and they're way louder than me. Just don't ask them. But by having a conversation, we can say, hey, just for an hour or whatever, can I just come into this space? And then an hour from now, the laughs will be on and everyone will be screaming at each other and stuff like that. So, yeah, probably don't like my question because it's my answer, sorry, because it's it's a bit black and white. But an internal versus external problem, I'll put that in the basket of. Kia ora.
Nice. Lovely. Some wonderful suggestions there, and I hope, Christelle, that helps you out with your predicament in your whare. Thank you, whānau, for your questions. Keep them coming in. As we take a look at another partai that's come in from our Facebook page, and this question is from Irene, and the question is, do you believe that oneness or connection is our natural state, and that our problems or imbalance arise when we begin to see ourselves as separate? And that confusion starts when we assume that our minds are the source of our own consciousness. So a wonderful question from you, Irene, and I know I can see our panelists they're all deep in thought. And maybe if we go in reverse order, and maybe if I can start with you, Timmy, and maybe just get your whakaaro around this wonderful partai from Irene.
Yeah, no, cool. Love this question and love going to these spaces. 100%. I think that the oneness and connection with ourselves and our natural state, but I also think there's some sit-down moments in that, and there's some humility in that. We need to appreciate from the Taiao's perspective that we're moving, states of mauri and order are changing all the time. So it's not something that you can just go run up and down some stairs for 4 hours and then you're going to ascend to this space. It's an ongoing challenge. And your own mind being the source of consciousness, that's just got belief systems written all over it. And again, 100%. If we believe from ourselves that we manifested ourselves and created ourselves and we're on the self-fulfilling journey, then we find it really difficult to know where we're supposed to go to, what we're governed by, what we're adjudicated by, what we believe in. Whether we believe in the seasons, whether we believe in one God or multiple gods or no gods or whatever. It's I think and these are all questions. I'm not trying to push whānau one way or the other. I've got mates that are devout religious people. I've got friends that are as far atheist as you could throw. And again, they've spent time going into their belief systems. But I think there's some humility in that, and I think to really understand that, we need to take a step outside of not only ourselves as a species and intergenerationally what this walk has been, but we need to also take a step outside and look at what that relationship is to a plant, an animal, a tree. With another exercise I love doing with the high school students, an atom. We started an atom, whole lot of atoms, we have a molecule. Whole lot of molecules form DNA. DNA is an organelle within a cell. Whole lot of cells form tissue. Whole lot of tissues form organ. Whole lot of organs form organism. That's not just us. That's the same as that leaf you pick up. That's the same as that dog you walk past. So that's the same as that puna that you go and drink from. So yeah, no, I love these types of questions. In terms of an answer, and again on the perspective shifting that we do in the whare, kei akwe, that's really what we try and do, is enable people to find the resource to go and answer those questions. But that's a haringa that that you sort of need to go into. So to put it bluntly, it's all good believing in nothing. Just spend time actually making sure you're believing in nothing.
Ka pai tēnā koe. Thank you for that, Timmy. I'm just wondering, Nick, do you have any whakaaro in regards to this pātai that's come from Irene?
Yeah, well, all my knowledge base comes from a Māori healer, a spiritual wairua perspective. From what I've experienced from different tohunga and pūrākau and teachings, there's some, what Irene is talking about, there are some commonalities. One commonality is that when we were talking earlier in our discussion around the formation stories of mankind coming from Papatūānuku, we know and we hear, not only within our culture, but within other cultures around the world, that there was a component of God placed within that inanimate object to spark the life of the first human into birth. If we're talking about consciousness and wairua and origins, what we're talking about within a Māori cultural context is really about that part of God that lies and resides within us, that animates us and gives us that spirit, the wairua, the soul, the consciousness to a body that is of matter. The journey that spark goes on of disconnection from Ngā Atua, from God, from Matua Kore, whatever you want to term that ultimate supreme being that gave us that part of him or her or itself to animate us. The reconnection journey is when we pass away and this physical body is no longer. That spark goes on a very specific journey within the Māori culture. And then we can alert it back to Te Paki o Matariki. All the different mātauranga and storylines that are housed within that symbol, Te Paki o Matariki, is around the ascension into a higher state of consciousness. So the travel and the journey of that spark of origin from God to us, and then back to creator source, back to the highest source of consciousness. Back to that there really is our home, back to our creator. Yeah, that's my uncontroversial slant.
Ka pai. Thank you, Nick, for your answers there and sharing your whakaaro around. And I hope for you, Irene, that answers your question. Let's take a look now at another question that's come in from our whānau that are tuning in this evening. And this is from Te Arai, and she's asking, how do you look after yourselves when having issues with people, in particular those in spaces that aren't reaching their obligations to the people? I mean, it's easy to get ready and highlight problems on Facebook. I do have my own processes. I'm interested in yours, please. So maybe if I can go to Milena, and just to get your whakaaro around this particular question from Te Arai.
Tēnā koe Te Arai. Choice pātai, and good that you put it into this space, because I think it's a discussion that needs more wānanga in spaces like this in general, and maybe even on Facebook, although sometimes some of the comments on there can be quite tragic. But I suppose my response to that is the flip side to the people that aren't meeting their obligations, and especially those that are getting funded and not meeting their obligations to serve the people that they're supposed to be serving. Just know that there are a whole heap of other people that are actually doing the mahi. And so there are those people that you can reach out to that will be able to help you, or people that are currently maybe isolating, as an example, and don't have access. And that could be internet, that could be, you know, the ones that just choose not to register, that they've got the COVID, etc., etc. This, you know, we just got whānau that, you know, that just aren't going to do it. So, waiho e rā tangata Kāori i te pai ki te taha, focus on those ones that you know that will support you and help you, even if it's not within your hapori. Because it will come back. Ira is real strong, and so that possibly could be a representation of the ira that comes down to them, and we can't blame them for that. It's something that they're going to have to rectify in their own sort of time, and we can argue, we can call them out and doing things like that. It's not going to change anything, but I suppose wānanga will. So focus on the things that you can focus on, which is the people that are helpful and that can do the mahi they're supposed to, like serving the people. That's quite a literal answer. We don't have enough time here to wānanga, but that's what I would absolutely do, because I'm currently going through the same thing too. How do I make sure that those people are responsible and meeting the needs and the outcomes, etc., etc.? The reality is we need solutions right now. So there are heaps of cool people out there that are actually doing the mahi. Focus on that, cuz, you know, moho koe.
Ka pai. I was going to go to Timidi just to get her whakaaro in regards to this, but I think, Milena, you have actually answered this pātai, and I think that's lots of good advice that Te Arai can take home with her. Ka pai whānau, loving the questions that are coming through, and absolutely loving the answers and replies that are coming from our panelists. Let's go to our final question from our whānau this evening, and this question is from Kylie, and it's asking, what are good pressure points to relieve stress? And I guess maybe Mills, if I can just come to you, what would be some good pressure points that you would be able to offer to relieve stress?
I think we've touched base on some of them tonight, you know, hoki ki te whenua, hoki ki o wai, you know, remove yourself away from those spaces that make you stressed. Engari, one of the things that I do, I look for the people that know how to look after me when I'm in a space like that, and I suppose, yes, that is a privilege for some of us, because you know, not all of us are fortunate to be around circles that can offer us those types of support. But I think I think we've touched base on some of those tonight, but definitely he wānanga tira. I don't have the answer, because I think you know, whenever we're different stresses require different pressure points, I think. But yeah, just hoki ki o wai, surround yourself around people that look after you when you're in a state like that. And even in that, try and find some things that make you feel good. You know, and I think I've spoken about it before, but you know, cleaning for me makes me feel good, and for some people it doesn't. So yeah, I think there's a wānanga that you might need to have with yourself, just to try and find some of those things, and when you do discover some of those things, write them down, because you know, when you get to those points, you can have a look at your list and say, okay, you know, this is what I need to be doing to try and get myself out of this this whakaaro. But yeah, so wai, hau, kai. Surround yourself around good people. Write yourself a list of things that make you feel good, and encourage yourself to go there before you get to that point.
Ka pai. And I think that's a lovely way to wrap up answering that wonderful question from Kylie. So thank you, Kylie, for your question. And of course, thank you to everyone that's asked a question this evening. I know that there's lots more questions, but unfortunately, Ete, we do have, we've run out of time actually. But I know that with this kōrero, we can keep going on and on and on throughout the night, talking about a variety of things. But thank you to all our whānau whānau that have sent through their questions this evening. And thank you to our panelists for sharing us, your experiences. I will come back to our guest panelists very shortly, but before we do say goodnight, let's just very quickly take a look at where the pop-up testing and vaccination centres will be for the rest of the week, and they will be set up at the Waipa Racecourse in Te Awamutu, also the Te Awamutu Vaccination Centre, the Countdown Car Park in Otorohanga, and the Miriama Club in Taumarunui, and not forgetting Te Oro o Ngātai, the Centennial Park site in Te Kuiti. Vaccinations are running across the Nehenehenui. They will be held this week at the Te Awamutu Sports Club, the Anglican Church in Kihikihi, the Te Pahu Primary School Hall in Te Pahu, and the St. David's Presbyterian Church in Otorohanga. You can see all of those details at the bottom of your screen, but for times and other locations nearest you for testing and vaccination centres, you can head to the Waikato DHB Facebook page. Ka pai. It's been a wonderful evening this evening, sharing some wonderful kōrero. And so just finally, if I can go around the room, beginning with you, Milena, just wondering what just some of the hints and tips that you can give to our whānau out there who are just finding this time mentally and emotionally exhausting. So what advice and guidance can you share at this time?
I think there's been a plethora of advice already shared tonight, and Te Miri just reiterated some of those things in response to Kylie's pressure point stuff. Hoki ki te wai, hoki ki o maunga, those sorts of things, and be courageous in starting to reclaim those practices amongst your whānau. All the tīwhiri around us, listen out for the tohu o ngā mātua tūpuna. They're right there, right in front of us. Tune in a bit more. Another simple practice is, have a hautapu. You don't have to just have a hautapu e Matariki. Have a hautapu, give thanks to our mātua tūpuna, bring everybody back together, and have a kai to celebrate the aspirational steps moving forward. Perhaps the suggestion or the kōrero that Te Miri also said, which also relates to the rest of the huanga on the screen, is that kind of aligns to the space of when you surround yourself with similar people, the output will be whatever that is, whether it's pai or not pai. So, and it doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It's about, consciously making that change or the considerations or the reflections. So, hoki atu ki ngā tohu o ngā mātua tūpuna, o ki ngā aronga o ngā tohunga Māori, kei reira te rongoa mo tātou. The vibrations in the world at the moment have been astronomically not cool. And we've also had to deal with a whole 182 plus years of having not cool vibrations that obviously impede on how we think, how we feel. So, ka kaha tātou ki te pupuri I rā huatanga o te Māori. Ora.
Kia ora, ka pai. And just finally, over to you, Te Miri, and I know you shared some advice earlier on this evening, but can you just remind our whānau who are isolating at the moment and who are wanting to connect with Te Taiao, just some advice and guidance that you can offer them at this time?
Yeah, kia ora. Just before we finish, kareo I te mātanga wahine mahi mara, he haututu noi hoa hau. But I think if I can leave any last comments for our whānau this evening is, kia kaha ki roto I a koe anō. Like Marlena said, we're going through a different phase in the world at the moment. So look after the things, not only the things that go into your hinengaro, but, the things that go into your tinana, like your kai. We've talked about rongoa tonight, and the importance of reconnecting that way through reconnecting that way back to our taiao and back to the whenua. And also the things that go in through your ears. So the conversations that you have with people and the things that you listen to, not just people are kupu nei, but the music that you listen to and all those types of things. Be mindful of those things, and just encourage people to be present and to be okay, not to be okay, because you're not the only one. There's definitely, everybody's going through it at the moment, and everybody's going through these strange times. And tell yourself that it's all right. Tell yourself that it's all right to be feeling this way. And we've been talking or mentioning a little bit our pūrākau, or our creation story, and the importance of going through te pō, and to come out on the other side into our maramas, is that we have to go there to be able to come out. We can't expect, and I think that's, am I going to say it? Yeah. Life, the world expects us to be well all the time. And we're encouraged to be well all the time, and to smile, and to, put your best face on and fake it until you make all of that sort of stuff. And at a time like this, though, that advice doesn't work, and it's not working. And so I think, just look after the things that you're looking at, you're reading, look after the things that you're listening to, look after the things that are going inside your tinana, and look after your environment, so the spaces that you go into as well. And that's again those your people that you hang out with. Engari, mihi nui ana kia koutou MFM for providing the space for our whānau to come together and wānanga. Mihi nui ana ki te pai kōrero for all your guys' wisdom, because man, I could be here for like 5 hours if MFM allowed us to, and I'm sure we'll be able to fill all that time in. But yeah, just really appreciate your guys' mahi and providing this type of kōrero and wānanga for our people, because we need it. We need it.
Ka pai, tēnā koe te mi, and it's always lovely talking with you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts this evening. Finally, over to you, Nick, just wondering what would be your final comments, and I guess words of guidance that you could provide for our whānau in terms of looking after te taha wairua, te taha hinengaro.
Yeah, the kōrero that we're all been hearing tonight is around that we're in very testing times. These times are testing us from all different angles, from all sides of our home, of the wharitapa whā model. It's testing us. The one kōrero that I can leave everyone with from a wairua perspective is that wairua tapu is never stagnant. It's always evolving. The time that we're in is a transformative time, but really the keys of transformation are left up to you. And what are you going to do in those times of moving something that is from a negative space through the possibility of transforming it into a positive space? Now that can be as simple as something like having gratitude, and the most basic of gratitude, to be thankful for, like where cousin Timmy was talking about the breath. So when we scale things back and we make things at a simple level, but those things that are very simple in gratitude are actually some of the key fundamental po of our existence, as simple as breath. Then suddenly everything from a Western paradigm that we have been fed that tells us what is important in our life is suddenly put back into perspective. Kia ora.
Right, tēnā koe, Nick. Thank you very much. That's very powerful points, and yeah, I certainly was taking notes. Ngā mihi ki a koe. And finally, coming over to you, Timmy, what suggestions, just to finish off, can you provide for our whānau who, I guess, in particular, wanting to look after their taha tinana?
Yeah, no, I'm loving this kōrero, that it's okay to not be okay. And even, I think for me, it spiked when there was the question about, what do you do when you're angry? A real simple answer could be angry. Obviously, it's then just finding your healthy outlets in which you can be angry and productive in, as opposed to destructive in. Because I think that's the humility that I'm hearing in a lot of the kōrero. For so long we've tried to do it ourselves, our own way, internally one way. Sometimes, we just need to wake up to ourselves and listen what's going on externally. Maybe we need to shift our internal beliefs. Maybe we need to shift how we're viewed and seen things, and it can stir up, not just deep things like values and character, but like I alluded to at the very start, you can find real beautiful things like gifts and skills. But how could you ever do that unless you went back into that place of potential? Because that the skill sets that they're amongst us, as cousin Nick said before, different atua will allow and put different lights into us and allow us to emanate at different frequencies. So some of us are gifted with our hands, so maybe they go down a miri romi pathway. So from a tinana perspective, just going back to Kylie's question about pressure points, one of the first things that everyone does when they're stressed is they lift their shoulders up. What that does is it stops the top of the lung from being able to expand. So we can't get enough oxygen in. It's actually one of the first signs of someone going through a panic attack or anxiety. So one of the first things you can do from a physical touch, and actually one of the things that delineates us as humans is having this opposable digit, is to lay your hands over, get your thumbs into the back of someone's, where their traps and where their neck muscle is, relax their shoulders down, breathe with them, and there's no surprise. And that's actually where a lot of trigger points are for people in through their traps for holding stress. So that could be a little gift or a little tip for people that, from a physical touch side. But there's so much at our disposal, like Malena said before. Rongoa Wairongoa Rako might be your pathway. So linking in with the Maramataka and sinking in with the Ngahere might be where you go. That deep meditative space and Inui and Karakia, that might be where your source of energy is. Maurako, the list goes and goes and goes. But I think that's some of the beauty of going down to that broken place and being able to have your internal belief shifted. It not only opens up, things that you can work on, but it also shows you the potentiality of things that maybe you haven't looked at before. So maybe we need to embrace some of the stuff that's going on. Maybe externally, we need internally, we need to humble ourselves. And maybe we need to submit to some of these testing times, internally go inside and see what gifts are within us and what can we continue to gift to the next generation.
Tēnā koe te tuakana. Thank you for sharing your final kōrero with us this evening. And of course, thank you to you all, actually, for your expert advice and also your insightful opinions, and also for the important mahi that you all continue to do, being there and supporting our whānau and our communities during this pandemic. Malena Huaki, Te Miri Tākare, Nick Pua, Timi Tāpara, thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of your evening tonight. E mihi ana kia koutou katoa. Well, e te iwi, that wraps up our session for tonight. We hope that the kōrero shared tonight gives you a better understanding of how you can look after your own personal well-being and of those around you, especially those who may be finding things a little bit challenging at the moment. And I dare say that our guest panelists will be able to be contacted if you do need further advice or guidance in that regard. Remember, e te iwi, MFM will keep you up to date with any breaking news and latest developments across our various platforms. And we will be back soon for another live Q&A here on Te Puna Kōrero or Te Nehenehenui. Thank you for joining us. Look after one another. Stay safe. Take care. Ki te kotahi te waihoe. Ka ora te iwi. Pō Mārie.